So next I'll talk about another set of 4 things relating to suffering. There are 4 kinds of suffering spoken about in the teachings and discourses, and it can be confusing with so many kinds of teachings and meanings. So some of them really can't end, so that phrase, end of suffering, doesn't make sense. So we'll take a look at these 4 kinds of suffering. One of the types of dukkha he talks about is what we've been talking about, the dukkha of the unpleasant and painful. He would describe life as being like the axle of an ox cart that's off-center, having a bumpy ride. Well, life is a bumpy ride, and that pain is inevitable kind of suffering, the first noble truth, really. And he sometimes called this kind of suffering dukkha dukkha, double dukkha, right? Or like dukkha squared, right? The unpleasant of unpleasantness, right? Like it's unpleasant that things are unpleasant. But this kind of dukkha, it can never end. These challenges in life just keep happening. Life is inherently painful at times. We can't change that immutable fact of existence. So that phrase, end of dukkha, just doesn't apply because it's dukkha dukkha. Second form of dukkha is the dukkha of change. So that which is pleasant will at some point become unpleasant. And that kind of dukkha also can't end because change is a feature of life. Right? So nothing we can say or do, no magic wisdom teaching or 30-day retreats or perfect practice technique will prevent things from changing. And that is inherently unsatisfactory in all kinds of small and large ways. We can all think of a time when something was pleasant and then it changed and then it wasn't pleasant anymore. And just that change was unpleasant, even if we adapted to the change and we were fine later, right? It's just that change itself. It happens, we can't avoid it, it's inevitable, and this kind of suffering cannot end. And there's a third kind of dukkha that also cannot end. And that is that nothing of a phenomenal nature will bring lasting happiness. And by phenomenal, we mean any phenomena, right? Sight, sound, taste, touch, emotions, ideas, beliefs, careers, family, size of bank account. Nothing will bring lasting happiness. That's a simple fact. These phenomena just won't do it. And that's a form of dukkha, and it's an immutable reality. Cannot end, so that suffering and the end of suffering doesn't apply. Right? So far we've talked about 3 kinds of suffering in which the phrase suffering and the end of suffering doesn't apply. The suffering of dukkha dukkha, the suffering of change, and the suffering of nothing ever bringing lasting happiness. So the 4th kind of suffering, though, it's woven through and articulated in the Buddhist teachings, is one that can end, and we've been talking about it from the moment we all gathered here, right? But it's often exemplified in the teaching of the 2 arrows. And the Buddha talked about it with his students. He said, everyone at times experiences the unpleasant. What differentiates a mature practitioner from a not mature one? And then he answered himself, because that's what he did. And these words that I'm going to say now are pretty, they're not modernized, so it'll be interesting. He said, when touched with a feeling of pain, the uninstructed, run-of-the-mill person, which is a not mature practitioner, sorrows, grieves, laments, beats his chest, becomes distraught. So he feels two pains, physical and mental, just as if they were to shoot a man with an arrow and right afterwards were to shoot him with another one so that he would feel the pains of two arrows. Goes on to say, sensing a feeling of pleasure, he senses it although joined with it. Joined with it. Sensing a feeling of pain, he senses it as though joined with it. So there's an attachment we're talking about. Sensing a neutral feeling, he senses that as though joined with it. He is joined with sorrows, lamentations, pains, distresses, and despairs. He is joined, I tell you, with suffering and stress. So these experiences that we have that may be unpleasant, we latch onto them. That's that clinging, right? That's how we get joined. It's a beautiful phrase, join. I like it better than cling. Join. And then he went on to talk about mature practitioners. He said, now, the well-instructed person, when touched with a feeling of pain, does not sorrow, grieve, or lament, does not beat his breast or become distraught. So he feels just one pain, physical, but not mental. Just as if they were to shoot a man with an arrow and right afterwards did not shoot him with another one, so that he would only feel the pain of one arrow. Sensing a feeling of pleasure, he senses it disjoined from it. Sensing a feeling of pain, he senses it disjoined from it. Sensing a neutral feeling, he senses it disjoined from it. This is called a well-instructed person, disjoined from sorrows, lamentations, pains, distresses, and despairs. He is disjoined, I tell you, from suffering and stress. Goes on to say, this is the difference, this is the distinction, this is the distinguishing factor between the well-instructed practitioner and the uninstructed run-of-the-mill person. None of you here are uninstructed run-of-the-mill people. For a learned person who has fathomed the Dharma, clearly seeing this world and the next, desirable things don't charm the mind. Undesirable ones bring no resistance. His acceptance and rejection are scattered, gone to their end, do not exist. Really dramatic words, lamentation, pounding. And we know he had quite a flair for the drama, but he's referring really to the slightest reactivity that we have to experiences, right? And that's why we're here, to learn how not to do that, how not to shoot the second arrow. Or in my experience, like, it could be a whole quiver of arrows, quivers right here, right? It's just like one arrow. Anybody have like multiple arrows? Like, yeah, I mean, when you're watching it, arrow of clinging, arrow of resistance, another arrow of clinging, and they can be labeled, clinging. Actually, they should be combined, because they are, yeah. On retreat, it might look like this. So you're bored, and that for you is an unpleasant feeling. And typically, we respond to the unpleasant by making a problem of it, pushing it away, trying to change it, and make it pleasant. We might find ourselves thinking about this, how disappointing this retreat has been, how you expected some insight or relaxation. That's the resistance. You become frustrated. You're not a fan of the way it is. You've jumped down the rabbit hole into discursive thinking, all of which increases your suffering. So those thoughts and emotions are the second arrow. They weigh you down, they double your suffering. You know, boredom can be painful and unpleasant on its own for some people, but when you add the lamentation, it's twice the pain. So learning how not to shoot the second arrow on retreat might work like this. So you notice the feeling of boredom, you investigate it, remember? Investigate. So not trying to change it and look for some secret fix. Right? Investigate it. So you notice where it's showing up in the body, different parts of the body. You could just let the boredom be, but surround it by the breath. It might pass. But you see, when you stay with that direct experience of the boredom, noting and labeling each of the parts, maybe thoughts too, always redirecting awareness back to the body, we avoid the archery field. Not that archery field that's out there, the metaphorical archery field. That's why we train so deeply in being with what's happening right now over and over and over again. And when we get better and better at that, at being with whatever's arising in the present moment without adding to it, we no longer shoot the second arrow because we're staying with the original thing, right? So all practice is about learning how not to shoot the second arrow. Another example that I could use with regard to pleasant experiences on retreat, because we do have those, is the sound of turkeys, and that's my clean. I love them, and the gobbles make me, and there are turkeys here sometimes, their gobbles make me smile. It's such a pleasant sound. It triggers pleasant sensations and lightness and thoughts and emotions and memories. I find myself thinking where I might locate them. I imagine skipping a sit to search them out. I've devolved into planning and clinging, and because of that, there's a slight dissatisfaction with the actual present moment right now. I mean, where are the turkeys? I want them, right? Want. So even a pleasant experience can become unpleasant when we don't get more of it. And that's the second arrow of wanting. Recall we mentioned last night that clinging and resistance together are called reactivity. And, you know, that's the source of suffering. So we can condense clinging, resistance to reactivity. Sometimes you'll hear me say that. Second arrow. So we can avoid the inevitable pains and hardships of life. We can't avoid the changes, the reversals of fortune, or the fact that no phenomena will bring lasting happiness. These cannot end, and they go with life, but the suffering of reactivity can end. Suffering and the end of suffering. And when Buddhists talk about suffering, that's usually what we mean. The suffering of reactivity. Dukkha and the end of dukkha. Not dukkha dukkha and the end of dukkha dukkha. Because dukkha dukkha can't end. I'm just saying. So that was a little about first part of the talk, the Four Noble Truths, right? Cause of suffering, path to freedom from suffering, the idea of searches. And we just talked about 4 kinds of suffering, especially the kind that can end, and the teaching on the second arrow.